What would you do if you suddenly started seeing ghosts? What if I told you that acknowledging said ghost's existence means your immediate death? This fact surely scared most of you that are watching this video right now, as how do you go about your life pretending to not see the horrifying entities haunting every premise in which you step foot in? The psychological warfare would be too much, and most, if not all who experience this misfortune, would buckle under the pressure and accept their inescapable deaths. What I just described to you is the plot of Mieruko-chan, an upcoming anime in the 2021 fall anime season. However, this summarization made Mieruko-chan sound like a psychological horror exploring the mind of someone who's perpetually paranoid of the world around her. And while this assessment isn't technically wrong, it's the way in which the story and characters are presented that mask the horrifying reality our main character is enduring. For you see, Mieruko-chan isn't exclusively a horror anime. It's also a comedy. That's right, the story about a girl being tormented by bloodthirsty ghosts is a comedy, and a damn good one at that. But please don't be mistaken, Mieruko-chan is just as much of a horror as it is a comedy, and its equal blend of both is vital to what makes the series so good. Now, horror comedy is by no means unique. Hell, I'd even wager it's one of the most common pairings between any genres out there. But if it's so common, there's gotta be a reason for why that's the case, right? Well, there is, and the case is a rather simple one. Horror and comedy set out to make the audience elicit completely opposite emotions. Horror intends to horrify you, while comedy intends to make you laugh and feel joy. Combine the two together, and you just secured an easy way to have a dynamic story by having the tone constantly change. Mieruko-chan is no exception, of course, as the tone will suddenly change from the comedic and lighthearted to horrific with each chapter. And while it isn't a particularly scary manga per se, it doesn't mean it's any less horrifying, both in terms of visual presentation and the scenarios in which Miku finds herself in. Understanding that horror is much more than just the idea of being scared or getting jump scared is vital to having a deeper connection with the genre as a whole. Implementing horrific ideas into your head or making you feel uncomfortable, disgusted, unnerved, etc. is equally important to horror as implementing fear into the viewer. And evoking these feelings is why Mieruko-chan shines so bright, in my eyes at least. The ghosts Miko encounters are drawn incredibly detailed, in contrast to the rather simplistic and cute style the human characters are drawn in, to accentuate their grotesque features and make them clearly stand out from the world. And remember, the very basis of this series is that Miko cannot acknowledge their existence, otherwise she'll die. So their art style isn't just for show, but to exemplify just how hard it is for her to ignore their presence when it's almost impossible to pretend something that obvious doesn't exist. If I really wanted to hyperanalyze this series, I could make the claim that it's one of the most horrifying scenarios you could ever find yourself in, as there's no way to make anybody believe you can see these ghosts, as you'll either be dismissed as a crazy person or get killed by the ghosts for proving you can see them. You'd essentially be locked in your own head, dealing with this battle on your own, with even the slightest mistake costing you your life. But this is still a comedy manga after all. Don't get me wrong, Miko being locked in her own head and dealing with the situation on her own is still present in the series, and is indeed a horrific scenario to be involved in, but there's still plenty of laughs to be had. Hana, Miko's best friend, is a ray of sunshine who's always happy no matter what, and parallels Miko's constant state of torment. This dynamic leads to some hilarious situation, where Miko is playing 4D chess on how to avoid a ghost in her way, while Hana is rambling on about her favorite sweets. It's one of the things that makes Mieruko-chan so fun, as there's so many different elements at play that make each chapter engaging. On one hand, you have a girl in constant stress with the ghosts haunting her, and on the other hand, you have a typical slice of life comedy, essentially meshing the two together. In a way, it reminds me of School Live, where the main character is pretty much living in an entirely different series than everybody else. Well, it's a lot like School Live, but way less tragic. Anyways, side characters aren't the only sources of comedy, as a lot of the comedy comes from Miko herself. Her facial expressions and clear signs of distress are funny. That may have made me sound like some sort of sadist, but believe me, you'll understand what I mean when you see it. From her constantly denying what's in front of her in her head over and over, to her shedding tears, whether it be from fear or the relief that she survived another situation, is funny, and is intended to be as such. I've been touching on how it's combining horror and comedy because I just want to stress how important both aspects are to one another, in hopes that it doesn't get dismissed as just a horror anime or just a comedy anime when it airs. Mieruko-chan is a love letter to all things horror by having many ghoulish designs reference pop culture or folklore, and is even airing in October, as there's no better month to celebrate the genre of horror. It's extremely funny as it has plenty of lovable characters with their own unique sets of quirks who are usually oblivious to Miko's predicament, leading to hilarious misunderstandings. It's the perfect balancing act, never treading too far into the horror territory where the comedy feels forced, or being so focused on comedy that it delegitimizes the horror. And without spoiling anything, Mieruko-chan ends up developing a really engaging plot, establishing sets of roles that will eventually be referenced later on, as well as using the concept of Miko being able to see ghosts to tackle some pretty emotional subjects. So if you made it this far into the video, I really do hope you give Mieruko-chan a chance, if you haven't already. And to convince the degenerates out there who are on the fence, Mieruko-chan is also an ecchi. For like the first 3 chapters. Yeah, it seems like the mangaka just wanted to bait people into reading by having panty shots. And goddammit, it worked.